Welcome, my friend. Before we begin our journey tonight, take a moment to find stillness. Let your shoulders ease, let your breath grow slower, and allow the noise of the day to drift softly away. This is your time for rest, reflection, and calm. As always, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Whether you are far across the ocean, in the quiet of early morning, or late in the stillness of night, you are welcome here. Together, we will step gently into history, not to be stirred or alarmed, but to be soothed by the rhythm of the past. Tonight, our path takes us to Jerusalem. In the year 70 CE, it was a city of immense faith, of contested power, and of extraordinary endurance. High stone walls rose above narrow streets. Markets bustled with the trade of spices, grains, and oils. Pilgrims arrived from distant lands, their footsteps echoing through the temple courtyards. But, alongside devotion and life, tension ran deep. The Roman Empire pressed its weight upon the people, and resistance grew. The siege of Jerusalem, when it came, would be one of the most defining and devastating moments in the city's long history. A trial of survival, a clash not only of armies, but of endurance, hunger, and faith itself. And yet, we will not rush into its violence. We will enter calmly, slowly, with care, exploring the daily rhythms of those who lived within the city, the lives of its leaders, the mysteries of its ruins, and the contrasts between the powerful and the ordinary. This is not a tale of gore or spectacle. It is a story of endurance, of human struggle, and of the rhythm of a world so different from our own. It is a story best told slowly, in detail, with care. So, close your eyes if you wish. Imagine yourself standing before the great walls of Jerusalem, their stones warm in the sunlight, their gates alive with movement. The sounds of prayer rise from the temple, mingling with the cries of merchants and the laughter of children. For a moment, life is ordinary, but just beyond, the Roman legions march closer. This is where our journey begins. Before the Roman armies surrounded Jerusalem, the city was alive with its own rhythms. Though tensions simmered, daily life continued much as it always had, marked by prayer, trade, family, and survival. To imagine the siege, we must first imagine what was at stake. A city filled with sound, scent, and movement. A city at once ordinary and sacred. Picture yourself walking through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. The paving stones are uneven, warmed by the sun. Walls of limestone rise close on either side, their surfaces worn smooth by time. Children weave between market stalls, their laughter echoing off the stones. The market is alive with voices. Merchants call out their wares, baskets of figs, jars of olive oil, sacks of grain, spices fill the air. The sharpness of cumin, the sweetness of cinnamon, the deep earthiness of dried dates. The bleating of goats and the clucking of hens mingle with human voices, creating a steady hum of life. Coins change hands, rough and worn from years of use. A woman bends to inspect a basket of bread, its crust dark and crisp, the scent rising warmly in the air. Nearby, a potter smooths clay on his wheel, shaping a vessel that will carry water, oil, or wine. This was the rhythm of daily life, ordinary, necessary, and constant. Beyond the marketplace, homes cluster along the winding streets. Most are small, built of stone, their roofs flat, their walls plain. Inside, rooms are simple, often centered around a hearth. Low lamps burn with olive oil, casting a soft glow over the walls. Meals are modest, bread dipped in oil, lentils simmered with herbs, perhaps dried fish or cheese if available. Families gather in close quarters, the air filled with quiet conversation, the flicker of firelight warming the space. The home is not only shelter, but refuge. A place of stillness in a city that was always shifting between devotion and tension. Above it all rose the temple, the heart of Jerusalem. Its massive stones and gleaming courtyards dominated the city skyline. Pilgrims came from far and wide to stand within its courts, to bring offerings, to pray. Imagine stepping into its vast spaces. The air is heavy with incense, the smell of burning offerings drifting upward. The sound of chanting rises, steady and measured, echoing from wall to wall. Priests move with care, their garments white, their gestures deliberate. For the people of Jerusalem, the temple was more than a building. It was the axis of their world, the place where heaven and earth touched. Life in Jerusalem was bound by faith. Sabbaths slowed the city into stillness. Festivals filled the streets with song, dance, and celebration. Families marked rituals at their tables, prayers woven into the rhythm of daily meals. Even in times of strain, faith carried the people forward. It was a constant presence, like the tolling of bells in a monastery, steady and unshakable. And yet, beneath these rhythms lay unease. Roman soldiers patrolled the streets, their armor glinting in the sun, their presence a constant reminder of foreign rule. Whispers of resistance moved quietly from home to home. Tensions rose between factions, those who sought peace with Rome and those who demanded rebellion. But in the marketplaces, in the homes, in the temple courts, life continued. The siege had not yet begun. The city still breathed in rhythm. Trade, prayer, family, faith. Picture the city at sunset. The walls glow golden in the fading light. Smoke rises gently from hearths, carrying the scent of bread and oil. In the temple, the last prayers of the day echo softly, while in the markets, stalls close and merchants gather their goods. Families withdraw into their homes, lamps glowing faintly through narrow windows. It is a city alive, but also a city on the edge. The rhythms of life continue, steady and familiar, even as the shadow of Rome grows closer. To understand the siege of Jerusalem, we must step into the life of the man who commanded it. Titus Flavius Vespasianus, known simply as Titus, a Roman general, son of the Emperor Vespasian, and heir to the might of the empire. His life was shaped by power, duty, and war, and it was his hand that would tighten the grip around Jerusalem. Titus was born in the year 39 CE into the Flavian family, a family not of ancient nobility, but of steady ambition. His father, Vespasian, rose through military service and political skill, eventually seizing the throne in a time of civil war. Titus grew in his father's shadow, trained in the ways of Rome, taught the disciplines of leadership, rhetoric, and arms. Imagine a young Titus walking the streets of Rome. The marble temples gleam. The forum bustles with senators and citizens. The legions march in ordered lines. From an early age, he knew the weight of empire, the expectation that his family's power must not only endure, but expand. When rebellion erupted in Judea, the Romans answered with force. The empire could not allow resistance to linger. Not in a province, not in a city as symbolic as Jerusalem. At first, it was Vespasian, Titus's father, who led the campaign. But when Vespasian was called back to Rome to claim the throne during the turmoil of the Year of the Four Emperors, command passed to Titus. Imagine the legions marching east under his authority. Thousands of soldiers, armored and disciplined, their shields gleaming, their standards carried high. The sound of their footsteps is steady, a drumbeat across the earth. Behind them follow wagons of supplies, siege engines in pieces, ready to be assembled before the city's walls. The march is long, deliberate, unstoppable. Each mile brings them closer to Jerusalem, closer to the final confrontation. Titus was a soldier, but he was also a politician. He knew the siege would not only be a battle, but a message. A demonstration of Rome's strength, a warning to any who thought to resist. And yet, accounts of Titus also show a man who could be pragmatic, who sometimes sought negotiation before destruction. But rebellion had hardened, and Jerusalem's defenders refused to yield. Imagine Titus in his command tent, maps spread across the table before him. He studies the city's walls, the hills surrounding it, the roads leading in and out. Outside, the fires of the Roman camp burn, their smoke rising into the night. He knows the city is sacred to its people. He knows the cost of conquest will be immense. And yet, he also knows that Rome cannot retreat. For Titus, the siege of Jerusalem was more than a military act. It was a defining test. Failure would weaken the empire. Victory would secure his reputation and his family's dynasty. Imagine him standing on a ridge, gazing down at Jerusalem for the first time. The city glows in the evening sun, its temple shining like gold. The walls are high, the gates strong, but Titus does not see them as obstacles. He sees them as challenges to be overcome, markers on the path of inevitable conquest. In the story of Titus, we find not only the tale of a man, but the weight of empire itself. A man born into ambition, shaped by Rome, placed at the head of legions, standing before one of the most sacred cities in the world. His decisions, his strategies, and his persistence would shape the fate of Jerusalem. And for those within the city walls, his name would become synonymous with the siege that tested every breath of survival. To understand the siege, we must pause before the walls of Jerusalem, the very stones that stood between the city and the Roman legions. These walls were more than barriers of stone. They were symbols of identity, resilience, and sacred protection. Even today, their remnants carry mystery, inviting us to imagine the strength they once held. Jerusalem's defenses in 70 CE were layered. The first wall, the oldest, enclosed the city of David, the earliest settlement on the southern hill. Its stones were weathered, its gates well-trodden, its structure carrying the memory of centuries. Above it rose the second wall, built later, stretching to encompass the northern expansion of the city. Here, homes and markets nestled close to the stone, their lives woven into the defences. The stones were broad, rectangular, carefully fitted, without mortar, each one set with care by generations of builders. Imagine standing before these walls. The limestone glows pale in the sun, its surface cool to the touch. In the crevices, small plants grow, their roots clinging stubbornly. Children run along their base, their laughter echoing against the stone. Merchants pass through the gates with goods, their carts creaking as they roll over the threshold. The walls are not lifeless. They are part of the rhythm of the city. By the time of the siege, a third wall had been added. Newer, stronger, higher. It stretched further north, enclosing new quarters of the city, and was built with urgency as threats from Rome grew. Its stones were larger, more imposing, their surfaces freshly cut, their alignment precise. Archaeologists today still debate parts of its exact path, uncovering fragments, foundations, and inscriptions that hint at its strength. Each discovery is a reminder of how deeply the people of Jerusalem invested in their defenses. How every stone carried both labor and hope. The walls held many gates, each one a point of entry, a passage of life. The Essene Gate opened toward the western hills. The Sheep Gate near the temple brought animals for sacrifice. The Dung Gate, more humble, led refuse outside the city. And the great Golden Gate on the eastern wall, facing the Mount of Olives, gleamed in the sunlight, a reminder of the city's sacred connection to prophecy. Imagine standing before a gate at dawn. The wooden doors creak open, the iron hinges groaning softly. Merchants pour in with goods, shepherds guide their flocks, pilgrims step through with eyes lifted toward the temple. Each gate is alive with movement, the threshold between the safety of the city and the uncertainty beyond. The walls of Jerusalem were not merely practical, they carried weight beyond their size. The largest stones were immense, some weighing many tons, cut with precision and laid without mortar. Even today, standing at the western wall, you can see the scale of these stones, their surfaces smooth yet scarred with time. Imagine placing your hand on such a stone. It is cool, solid, immovable. It carries centuries within its weight. Silent witness to countless lives, countless prayers, countless struggles. But the walls, for all their strength, became a trap during the siege. Once the Roman armies surrounded the city, the gates that once welcomed pilgrims became barriers that held people in. The walls that promised protection now sealed the people of Jerusalem within hunger, thirst, and despair. This is the paradox of defenses. The stronger they stand, the more final their fall. Picture Jerusalem at twilight. The walls rise against the fading sky, their stones glowing softly in the last light of day. The gates are closed, the streets within grow quiet, and the city lies enclosed in its embrace of stone. To the people within, the walls are safety, pride, and heritage. But just beyond, the Roman campfires glow, surrounding the city in a ring of flame. Inside Jerusalem's walls, life was not equal. Like all great cities, it held layers of wealth and poverty, privilege and struggle. When the siege began, these contrasts sharpened, revealing who could endure and who would suffer first. To understand survival in Jerusalem, we must see not only the city as a whole, but the divisions that shaped daily existence. The wealthy of Jerusalem lived in large stone houses, some with multiple rooms and inner courtyards. Archaeology has uncovered remnants of these homes, mosaic floors, frescoes on plastered walls, and fine pottery. Their owners could afford storage jars filled with grain, oil, and wine, hidden away in cool cellars. Imagine walking into such a home before the siege. The courtyard is open to the sky, shaded by a fig tree. Water trickles into a cistern, its surface cool and still. Clay lamps flicker in the rooms, their shelves lined with jars of spices, their chests filled with clothing of dyed wool. During the early days of the siege, these families endured with relative comfort, drawing on stored supplies, their tables still bearing bread, olives, and wine. But as weeks stretched into months, even their wealth could not protect them fully. Stored food dwindled, servants fled, and silence replaced the bustle of their courtyards. For the poor, life was always precarious, and the siege made survival nearly impossible. They lived in small, crowded houses near the lower city. Their meals were modest, even in good times. Bread made from coarse grain, lentils, or dried figs when available. With the siege, trade halted, markets closed, and food vanished quickly. Imagine a small home in the lower city. The roof is patched with branches, the walls rough and plain. A family gathers around a low table, their bowls nearly empty. The children's voices are quiet, their eyes wide, the parents silent in worry. For them, hunger came swiftly, long before the wealthy felt its edge. Above both rich and poor stood the priestly elite of the temple. Families who held religious authority, who presided over sacrifice, and who often lived with greater resources. Their position gave them influence, but it also placed them at the center of conflict. When the city fractured into factions during the siege, the temple elite were both leaders and targets, their privilege turning quickly into danger. Imagine priests standing in the temple courts, their robes white, their voices steady in prayer, even as the city starved outside its walls. For the people, their presence was both reassurance and frustration, a reminder of faith, but also of inequality. As hunger deepened, divisions grew sharper. The wealthy clung to what remained of their supplies, while the poor searched desperately for scraps. The factions within the city fought not only against Rome, but against one another. What had once been a shared faith and identity splintered into anger, mistrust, and violence. Imagine the streets at night. Fires flicker in courtyards. Shadows move quickly through alleyways. Whispers of betrayal hang in the air. Neighbors no longer trust one another. The city, once united in prayer, becomes divided by fear. And yet, in time, siege makes all equal. The wealthy cannot eat gold. The poor cannot survive on hope alone. Hunger and thirst reduce every household to the same struggle. The walls that enclosed rich and poor alike became a prison for all, regardless of status. Imagine the city as weeks stretch into months. The wealthy houses grow quiet, their storerooms empty. The poor quarters fall silent, their fires extinguished. Every home, every family, waits in the same exhaustion, listening for the sound of the Roman battering rams outside the walls. Picture Jerusalem at dusk during the siege. The mansions of the wealthy, the huts of the poor, the courts of the temple, all are touched by the same silence, the same hunger, the same dread. Class and privilege mattered less with each passing day, replaced by the shared reality of survival. The siege was not only a clash of armies, it was the collapse of the city's divisions, the leveling of its society under the heavy hand of despair. As the Roman legions tightened their grip around Jerusalem, life inside the city slowed into a single struggle: survival. The markets were empty, the gates closed, the countryside cut off. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months, and every household faced the same steady decline of food, water, and strength. At first, families relied on what they had stored: grain in jars, olives preserved in oil, dried figs tucked away in baskets. But these dwindled quickly. Soon, meals shrank into fragments. A crust of bread, a few lentils boiled thin in water, a handful of bitter greens gathered from cracks in the walls. Imagine sitting in a small home at dusk. The fire burns low, the pot nearly empty. A family passes around a piece of bread so small it barely touches the tongue. The air is silent, broken only by the slow chewing, the sigh of exhaustion. Hunger gnawed slowly, never satisfied, always present. It dulled the mind, weakened the body, and stretched time into endless waiting. Water, too, became scarce. The city's cisterns, once full, grew lower with each passing day. Without rain, the levels dropped, and the taste grew stale, earthy, heavy. Imagine lifting a clay cup to your lips. The water is warm, carrying the flavor of stone. You drink slowly, measuring each swallow, knowing there may be little more tomorrow. The sound of dripping water in a cistern became a kind of prayer, each drop more precious than gold. Siege life was not only about hunger and thirst, it was about the weight of time itself. Each day followed the same rhythm: waking to hunger, searching for food, waiting in silence, listening to the sounds of the Romans beyond the walls. Imagine lying on a mat at midday, the sun pressing heat against the stone roof. The air is still, your body too weary to move. your thoughts drifting slowly between memory and longing. You remember markets filled with fruit, streets alive with laughter, the temple courts glowing with light. Now, all is narrowed to stillness, waiting for the next day, the next moment, the next breath. Outside the walls, the Romans built their siege works. The thud of hammers, the rumble of wheels, the steady rhythm of soldiers at labor carried faintly through the air. Inside the city, people listened, their ears attuned to every noise. Imagine standing on the wall at night, the torches of the Roman camp glowing in the distance. You hear faint voices, the sound of men speaking in Latin, the bark of orders, the clang of metal. Beyond the walls, life continues with strength and abundance. Within the walls, life narrows into silence. As days turned to weeks, despair settled. The strong grew weak, the hopeful grew quiet, the proud lowered their heads. Each morning brought no relief, only the same hunger, the same thirst, the same waiting. Imagine the streets at twilight. Few walk now. Most stay within their homes, conserving what little strength they have. The silence of the city is broken only by the distant Roman drums, the steady beat of inevitability drawing closer. Picture Jerusalem under the stars. The walls stand silent, the streets lie empty, the homes are dark. Inside, families huddle in stillness, their voices hushed, their bodies weary. The siege is not a sudden storm, but a slow suffocation, each day pressing heavier than the last. For those within, survival is no longer about thriving, but about enduring. Each drop of water, each crumb of bread, is a victory. Each moment of rest, each breath taken, is another step into the endless rhythm of waiting. While the people of Jerusalem endured hunger and thirst within the walls, the Romans labored without pause beyond them. Their strength was not only in numbers, but in discipline, organization, and the machinery of war. Siege engines, vast constructions of timber and iron, became the steady instruments that pressed against the city. Step by step, with unyielding force, the Roman legions were not only soldiers, they were builders. Each day, they cut trees from the surrounding hills, shaping them into beams, planks, and wheels. Axes rang through the forests, saws scraped against wood, hammers echoed across the camp. Imagine standing on the walls of Jerusalem, watching the Roman camp below. Lines of soldiers carry timber, carts creak with heavy loads, sparks fly as iron is shaped for bolts and hinges. The construction is relentless, orderly, efficient. For the Romans, this is not improvisation. It is craft, refined over centuries of conquest. One of their most formidable creations was the siege tower. Tall wooden structures, mounted on wheels, rising as high as the city walls. Covered in hides to resist fire, they were slowly rolled forward, each day creeping closer to the defenses. Imagine looking out from the wall at dawn. In the distance, a tower rises, its wooden frame dark against the sky. Each day it grows taller, each day it moves nearer. The people within the city whisper in our knees, watching its shadow lengthen across the plain. It is not a sudden assault, but a slow inevitability, looming higher and higher. At the base of the walls, the Romans brought battering rams. Massive beams tipped with iron, suspended on chains, swung rhythmically against stone. Imagine the sound, a deep, steady thud, like a drumbeat of war. Again and again, the iron head strikes the wall, the vibrations carrying through the stone beneath your feet. The rhythm is unhurried, patient, tireless. The wall does not fall at once, but slowly, stone by stone, crack by crack. For those inside, each strike is not only against the stone, but against the spirit. Above the walls, defenders watched as the Romans assembled catapults. machines that hurled stones, spears, and flaming projectiles. With each shot, the city shook. Roofs splintered, walls cracked, fires broke out in narrow streets. Imagine a stone the size of a man's head crashing into the city, dust rising into the air. The sound echoes, then fades, replaced by silence, a silence heavy with fear, as people wonder where the next will fall. The siege engines did not move quickly. They crept forward day by day, assembled piece by piece. But their slowness was its own kind of terror. Every dawn revealed them closer. Every dusk left the people staring at their looming shadows. Imagine standing on the wall in the evening, the Roman campfires flicker, the outlines of towers rise against the stars, the rams rest in silence until morning. The people of Jerusalem wait, knowing that tomorrow the engines will move again. Picture the city enclosed by its walls, the Romans building tirelessly beyond them. Inside, hunger grows. Outside, towers rise, rams swing, catapults hurl. The siege is not a single act, but a slow tightening. The patient advance of empire against the endurance of a city. The people within are weary. The Romans without are tireless. The rhythm of the siege continues, unbroken, unrelenting, until the balance tips. Amid hunger, fear, and the slow advance of Roman engines, one place still stood as the heart of Jerusalem, the temple. It was more than stone and ritual. It was the axis of faith, the meeting point of heaven and earth, the place where the people believed God's presence dwelt. In the time of siege, its courtyards filled not only with worship, but with desperation, hope, and longing. The temple was vast. Its outer courts bustled with pilgrims, merchants, and priests. Its inner courts glowed with the smoke of offerings, the flicker of lamps, the sound of psalms recited in steady cadence. Imagine standing in the temple courts at dawn. The first rays of sunlight strike the golden facade, gleaming as if the stones themselves were aflame. The air is heavy with incense, the smoke rising into the morning sky. The voices of priests chant steadily, their tones low and unhurried, echoing off the high walls. For the people, this was the heart of their identity. No matter what the Romans built outside the walls, within the temple, life still touched the divine. Even as hunger deepened, people gathered in the temple. Families brought prayers, priests offered sacrifice, and psalms were sung with weary voices. The temple became a refuge, not of food or water, but of hope. Imagine a mother kneeling with her child, whispering a prayer as the sound of distant rams echoes faintly. Her hands are clasped tightly, her eyes closed. She knows the hunger in her body, the fear in her heart, but in this place she feels a moment of peace. The temple did not erase suffering, but it gave meaning to endurance. The priests continued their duties, even under siege. They dressed in white garments, their movements deliberate, their voices calm as they recited ancient prayers. The sacrifices continued, though resources dwindled. Imagine a priest standing before the altar. The air is hot with smoke. The light of the flames flickers against the stone. His hands move carefully, his face steady, even as the city around him trembles with fear. For him, ritual is not simply obligation. It is the one constant that cannot be broken. The temple was also a symbol of unity. Even as factions within the city quarreled, even as rich and poor divided, all turned their eyes toward the temple. Its presence reminded them of their shared identity, their shared faith, their shared history. Imagine standing on a rooftop in the lower city, looking up at the temple at night. It glows faintly in the starlight, a silent reminder that the city, however divided, is still bound together by this sacred space. Yet holiness carried tension. Some believed the temple would never fall, that God's presence would protect it from Rome. Others feared that its sanctity would draw the greatest fury of the siege. Imagine whispers in the streets. Surely God will not let the temple be destroyed. Others shake their heads, their voices hushed, fearing the opposite. The temple was hope, but it was also burden. Its survival, or its fall, would define not only the city, but the faith of generations. Picture the temple at twilight. The sun sets behind its walls, the sky glowing red and gold. The courtyards are filled with weary pilgrims. Priests move slowly through their rituals. Voices rise in psalm and prayer. Outside, the Roman towers loom, their shadows stretching long. Inside, the people cling to the temple, their last sanctuary of hope. The siege pressed harder each day, but the temple still stood, its stones firm, its rituals steady, its presence unbroken. While the Romans pressed from without, another struggle grew within the walls of Jerusalem. The city was not united. Instead, it fractured into factions, each with its own leaders, its own vision, its own desperate will. These divisions deepened the suffering of the people, and in many ways hastened the city's fall. One group was the Zealots, fierce in their resistance, unwavering in their hatred of Roman rule. They believed surrender was betrayal, that death was better than submission. Armed and determined, they held parts of the city, enforcing their vision with strict control. Imagine walking through the streets where zealot patrols pass. Their eyes are sharp, their voices firm, their hands never far from their weapons. For some, they are heroes, defenders of faith and freedom. For others, they are oppressors, bringing fear as much as protection. Opposing them were more moderate voices, priests, elders, and citizens who longed for peace. They knew Rome's power. They feared the destruction that resistance would bring. They sought negotiation, compromise, a way to preserve life and the temple. Imagine a gathering in a quiet home at night. Elders sit in dim lamplight, speaking in hushed tones. Their faces are weary, their words cautious. They long for an end to suffering, but their voices carry little weight against the cries of zeal and resistance. In time, the factions turned not only against Rome, but against each other. Streets that once carried pilgrims and merchants became battle lines between neighbors. Homes were burned, stores of food destroyed in acts of defiance or control. Imagine standing on a rooftop, watching smoke rise not from Roman catapults, but from fires set within the city itself. The scent of burning grain fills the air, a bitter reminder that the greatest enemy was sometimes not outside the walls, but within them. For the ordinary people of Jerusalem, these divisions were unbearable. They were caught between extremes. The zealots demanding sacrifice, the moderates pleading for peace, the Romans pressing from without. Families had no power to choose their fate. They simply endured, listening to the clash of voices, the crackle of fire, the endless hunger that deepened each day. Imagine a mother holding her child close in a darkened room. Outside, voices shout, weapons clash, the sound of footsteps rush through the streets. She closes her eyes, wishing only for silence, only for safety, even for a moment. What might have been endured together fractured under division. The unity of faith, the shared devotion to the temple, was overshadowed by mistrust and conflict. The city, surrounded by enemies, became its own battlefield. Imagine the silence after an internal skirmish. The streets are littered with ash, the walls darkened with smoke, the people weary and broken. The Romans beyond the gates watch patiently, knowing that division within would hasten their work. Picture Jerusalem at twilight during the height of its division. The walls stand tall, The temple glows faintly in the distance, but within the city, fires smolder and voices of discord echo in the night. The people pray for unity, but the factions remain locked in strife. The siege was not only a matter of walls and rams, hunger and thirst, it was also a matter of hearts divided, of a city weakened not only by the enemy without, but by the conflicts within. Outside Jerusalem's walls, the Romans carried on their work with steady calm. They were not hurried, nor easily unsettled. They had besieged many cities before, and their strength lay not only in numbers, but in discipline, patience, and the practiced method of empire. While the people within weakened, the soldiers without lived in ordered rhythm. The Roman camp itself was like a city of its own, laid out in precise grids, with streets, gates, and watchtowers. It mirrored the order of Rome itself. Each soldier knew his place, each tent was pitched in alignment, each fire placed at the same intervals. Imagine standing on a hill overlooking the Roman camp at night. The rows of tents stretch in perfect lines, their leather surfaces glowing softly in the firelight. The smoke from cooking fires drifts upward in gentle columns, the faint hum of voices rising in conversation. Here there is no chaos, no panic, only calm order. Roman soldiers followed a daily rhythm as steady as the monks of later centuries. They trained, drilled, repaired equipment, cut timber, built engines, stood watch. Their days were filled with labor, their nights with guarded rest. Discipline was enforced strictly, but it gave them resilience. Imagine a soldier sharpening his sword at dawn. The sky glows faintly, the air is cool. His motions are slow, steady, repeated countless times. Nearby, another soldier oils his shield, while others eat their rations of bread, cheese, and watered wine. Each task is small, but together they create the strength of the legion. The Romans knew that time was on their side. They could wait. They could build, and circle, and press steadily forward. Hunger would do its work within the walls, even as discipline maintained strength outside them. Imagine Titus, the general, walking slowly along the lines of soldiers. His gaze is calm, his steps measured. He does not need to rush his men. He knows that the city within is already weakening, that every day makes Rome's victory more certain. Among the legions were engineers skilled in the arts of building and breaking. They measured distances, set foundations, built towers, dug trenches. Their work was as vital as the swords of the soldiers. Imagine a group of engineers at work by torchlight. They measure carefully with cords and rods, driving stakes into the ground, aligning beams of wood. The crack of hammers and the scrape of saws echo into the night. Each action is deliberate. Each structure rises with purpose. While others rest, they continue, shaping the machines that would one day breach the walls. The contrast between the camp and the city was stark. Outside, the Romans ate their rations, drilled their soldiers, maintained order. Inside, the people of Jerusalem weakened. Their factions fought, their supplies dwindled. One side grew stronger with each passing day, the other weaker. Imagine the view from the wall. Looking out, you see rows of soldiers drilling, their movements precise, their voices sharp. Then you turn inward, and you see the weary faces of your neighbors, the quiet of empty markets, the silence of hunger. The difference is unmistakable. The Roman method was not brilliance in a single moment. It was steadiness, discipline, patience. They did not need to break the city in haste. They only needed to wait, to press slowly, to let time weaken what walls could not. This was the rhythm of empire. Unhurried, deliberate, enduring. Picture the Roman camp at dusk. The fires glow in even lines. The soldiers eat their meals, the engineers rest after labor, the sentries take their posts. There is calm, there is order, there is patience. The siege is not rushed, but inevitable. Inside the city, despair grows. Outside, the legions wait, steady as stone. Behind the high walls of Jerusalem, beyond the clash of factions and the shadow of Roman engines, were ordinary lives. Mothers and fathers, children and elders, families who had no voice in the decisions of leaders. They endured not with weapons, but with patience, with hope, and with quiet despair. Their stories remind us that siege is not only an event of armies, but a burden borne most heavily by the innocent. Imagine a small family gathered around a low wooden table, where once there had been bread, lentils, figs, and oil. Now there is almost nothing. A crust is divided into pieces so small it barely touches each hand. The children eat first, the parents watching in silence, pretending not to notice their own hunger. The air is heavy. The lamp burns low. The silence speaks louder than words. Each meal is no longer nourishment, but an act of endurance, a ritual of surviving another day. For the elders, the siege was a burden of memory. They had seen festivals in the temple courts, markets filled with song, children running freely in the streets. Now they saw silence, emptiness, and fear. Imagine an old man sitting by the doorway of his home, his back against the stone wall. His eyes are distant, his breath slow. He listens to the faint echoes of the city, the sound of hammering outside the walls, the distant cries of neighbors, the low murmur of prayer. He remembers better days, but memory cannot ease hunger. For him, survival is not only about the body, but about carrying the weight of loss. Children felt the siege in their own way. They did not fully understand the politics, the factions, the might of Rome. They only knew hunger, silence, and fear. Imagine a child playing with a small carved toy in the corner of a dim room. The wood is smooth from years of use, the movements of play slow, distracted. The child looks to the doorway, waiting for a parent to return, waiting for food that may not come. The laughter of children, once common in the markets, is now rare, replaced by quiet eyes and empty hands. For mothers, the siege was an agony of care. To watch children hunger, to see them weaken, to have nothing more to give. Imagine a mother cradling her child at night, humming softly to soothe the little one to sleep. The song is faint, weary, but it carries love, even in despair. Outside, the Romans wait. Inside, the mother holds the weight of the world in her arms, whispering words of comfort that even she no longer believes. Amid despair, small acts of endurance carried families forward. Neighbors shared scraps of food. Elders told stories to comfort children. Prayers were spoken in whispers by lamplight. Even in suffering, life continued in small, steady rhythms. Imagine sitting in a courtyard at dusk. The air is cool, the stars faintly visible above the high walls. A family sits together, speaking softly, their words not of politics or war, but of memories, hopes, and simple gratitude for one another. The siege cannot take every comfort, though it tries. As the weeks stretched on, silence deepened in the city. Markets no longer bustled, streets no longer rang with voices. The silence of hunger, the silence of despair, pressed heavily upon every household. Imagine walking through the city at midday. The streets are nearly empty, doors closed, windows shuttered. The only sounds are the distant thud of rams outside the walls and the occasional cry of a child. The silence is not peace, it is survival, stretched thin and weary. Picture Jerusalem at night, from within its walls. Families huddle in their homes. Lamps flicker faintly, voices whisper softly. Children sleep in their mothers' arms, elders rest with memories, fathers stare silently into the darkness. The siege is not only a story of soldiers and generals, it is a story of families who endured quietly, who suffered silently, who carried the true weight of survival. Every siege carries a moment when endurance breaks, when stone gives way to iron, and silence is shattered. For Jerusalem, that moment came when the Roman legions finally breached its walls. It was not sudden. It was the culmination of months of hunger, labor, and waiting. The walls, once symbols of safety, could no longer hold. The battering rams had struck for weeks, each blow sending tremors through the city. At first, the stones held firm, but slowly cracks spread through the mortarless joints. Dust drifted down with every strike, faint at first, then heavier. Imagine standing near the wall, your hand pressed to the stone. With each impact, you feel the vibration travel through your body. A faint crack runs across the surface, widening day by day. The wall that had seemed eternal begins to yield. The Romans pressed their towers closer, their rams swinging with greater force, their catapults hurling stones and fire. Defenders on the walls grew weaker with hunger, their arms too tired to lift weapons, their voices hoarse from shouting. Imagine looking out from the battlements at dawn. Below, a siege tower looms, its top nearly level with where you stand. Inside it, Roman soldiers prepare ladders, shields, and weapons. Their calm is unbroken. They know the breach is near. When the wall finally gave way, it was not a single roar, but a slow surrender. A section of stone shifted, then crumbled, dust rising in a heavy cloud, the air filled with the deep groan of stone breaking, the crash of rocks falling, the cries of both attacker and defender. Imagine the dust settling, revealing a jagged gap where the wall once stood whole. Through it, the Romans pour steadily, shields raised, steps measured. Their entry is not wild, but disciplined, as steady as their building of engines, as patient as their campfires by night. Inside, panic spread quietly. Some fled deeper into the city, carrying children, clutching possessions. Others tried to resist, gathering in narrow streets, their bodies weak but their spirits defiant. Imagine standing in your home, hearing the sounds in the distance, the steady thud of Roman boots, the creak of shields, the muffled shouts carried through the streets. You gather your family close, waiting, unsure where to turn, knowing the walls no longer protect you. For months, the people had prayed that the walls would hold, that Rome might turn away, that endurance might be enough. But now, with the breach open, the truth was clear. The walls that once defined Jerusalem's strength had become only memory. Imagine the city at twilight on the day of the breach. The dust still hangs in the air. The streets are filled with silence and movement. Both the Romans advance steadily. The people retreat deeper into the city. The sense of inevitability settles like a heavy cloak. The fall has begun. Picture Jerusalem from above. The breach gapes wide in the northern wall. Smoke drifts in the air, and the people scatter like shadows through narrow streets. The city that had endured hunger and division now faces its final trial. The walls, once so strong, could not save it. And yet, within its stones, the memory of endurance remains. For centuries, the temple had stood as the soul of Jerusalem. Its stones gleamed in sunlight, its courts rang with prayer, its rituals bound the people together. But in the siege of 70 CE, even the temple could not stand untouched. Its fall was not only the loss of a building, but the breaking of a world. Before we speak of its loss, we must first remember its presence. The temple rose on the highest point of the city, its walls broad, its courts vast, its sanctuary lined with gold. Pilgrims climbed its steps, their voices lifted in psalms, their offerings placed in its courts. Imagine yourself entering its great courtyards at dawn. The marble stones glow pale. The golden doors shimmer in the first light. The scent of incense drifts upward. The sound of chanting rolls like waves across the open air. For the people, this was not simply architecture. It was heaven touched upon earth. When the Romans entered the city, the temple became a focal point of both defense and resistance. Fighters rallied there, refusing to surrender. In the struggle, flames were set. Some say by Roman hands, others say in the chaos of battle. Imagine standing in the outer court as smoke begins to rise. At first, it is faint, a thin line curling upward into the sky. But soon it thickens, darkening the air, filling the lungs with its weight. The sound of crackling wood mixes with the cries of defenders and the steady advance of soldiers. Ancient writers tell us that the flames caught the gold of the temple, reflecting light as if the building itself were ablaze with brilliance. The sanctuary glowed with fire and sunlight together, a vision both terrible and beautiful. Imagine the sight from the city streets. The temple rises above all, its golden roof aflame, its smoke pouring high into the heavens. The people watch in silence, their faces lit by the firelight, their hearts sinking as they realize that their center, their heart, their sacred ground, is no more. The fall of the temple was more than destruction. It was silence. The psalms no longer echoed. The sacrifices no longer burned. The priests no longer moved in white robes through sacred courts. The space that had bound generations together was gone, leaving only ash and memory. Imagine standing on the Mount of Olives, looking across the valley at the city. Where once the temple stood radiant, now only smoke drifts, heavy and slow. The sound of prayer is gone, replaced by the quiet crackle of fire and the distant murmurs of despair. For the Romans, the temple was conquest. For the people of Jerusalem, it was devastation. Its loss was not only material, but spiritual. It marked the end of an age, the breaking of a rhythm, the scattering of a people. Imagine the people gathered in silence, unable to speak, unable to weep, their eyes fixed on the smoking ruins. The fall of the temple was not only their sorrow, it was their identity undone. Picture Jerusalem at twilight on the day of the temple's fall. The sky glows red, the smoke rises high, the stones of the city shimmer in firelight. The Romans walk calmly through the streets, their work steady, their victory certain. The people watch from shadows, their world broken, their sacred heart lost. The temple, once eternal in their eyes, had fallen, and with it the city was never the same. When the flames of the temple dimmed and the walls of Jerusalem lay in ruin, the siege gave way to aftermath. For the Romans, it was victory. For the people of Jerusalem, it was silence, loss, and dispersal. The city that had once gathered thousands in its markets and courts now stood hollow, its stones scarred, its streets empty. Some remained alive within the city, weary, starving, broken in body but still breathing. They emerged from hiding places, from homes half burned, from the shadows of collapsed walls. Their steps were slow, their voices faint. Imagine walking through the streets after the siege. Dust lingers in the air, ashes coat the stones, the smell of smoke clings to every surface. The survivors move like shadows, their eyes hollow, their hands trembling. They search not for food now, but for meaning, for a way to continue in a world that no longer feels familiar. Many were taken as captives by the Romans. Some were marched away in chains, bound for slavery in distant lands. Others were kept as symbols of victory, paraded through Roman cities in triumphal processions. Imagine the long line of captives walking under the hot sun. Their heads are bowed, their bodies thin, their steps uneven. Roman soldiers flank them, their armor gleaming, their pace steady. For the captives, every step carries them farther from Jerusalem, farther from the temple, farther from the world they had known. Among the captives were children, carried on parents' shoulders or walking with small, tired steps. For them, the city of their birth became only memory. They would grow up in foreign lands, hearing stories of Jerusalem spoken softly at night, stories of a home they might never see again. Imagine a child clutching a small piece of broken pottery, a shard taken from the ruins as a keepsake. It is smooth in the hand, a fragment of a world already fading. The child does not understand the weight of loss, but carries it nonetheless. Those who were not captured fled. Some escaped into the countryside, hiding in caves, wandering from village to village. Others traveled far, settling in lands across the empire, carrying their faith and their memory with them. Imagine a small group leaving Jerusalem at night, slipping quietly through broken walls. They carry little: a bundle of food, a water jar, a small scroll. Behind them, the city glows faintly with embers. Ahead of them, only uncertainty. But still they walk, carrying Jerusalem in their hearts. Jerusalem itself fell silent. Its streets, once alive with markets and prayer, were now empty. The temple courts lay in ruin, the sound of psalms replaced by the cry of crows circling overhead. Imagine walking through its ruins at dawn. The light reveals toppled stones, scattered pottery, doorways leading to nothing. The city feels both vast and hollow, filled not with people but with echoes. The siege did not end with victory or loss. It left a shadow that stretched across generations. For the Romans, it was a triumph celebrated in marble arches and golden treasures. For the people of Jerusalem, it was memory, sorrow, and exile. Imagine a family many years later, gathered in a distant land. They speak of Jerusalem by lamplight, their voices soft, their faces turned toward memory. For them, the city lives not in stone, but in story, a place carried within, even when its walls are gone. Picture Jerusalem under the stars in the aftermath of the siege. The fires are out, the streets are still, the temple lies in ashes. A few survivors wander through its ruins, their footsteps soft, their voices faint. The city endures in silence, its stones heavy with memory, its spirit scattered like dust upon the wind. The siege was not only the breaking of walls, it was the scattering of lives, the carrying of memory, the transformation of Jerusalem into a story told across time. For the Romans, the fall of Jerusalem was not only a conquest, it was a symbol, a story to be told across the empire, proof of Rome's power and endurance. While the people of Jerusalem mourned in silence, the Romans celebrated in triumph. The city's fall became part of Rome's glory. When Titus returned to Rome, he was granted a triumphal procession, the highest honor a general could receive. Through the crowded streets of the capital, soldiers marched in order, bearing the spoils of Jerusalem. Imagine the scene. The marble streets of Rome are lined with citizens, their voices rising in cheer. Trumpets sound, drums beat, banners flutter in the breeze. The legionaries walk proudly, their armor gleaming, their steps in perfect rhythm. Behind them, carts carry treasures taken from the temple. Golden lamps, sacred vessels, even the great menorah, its 7 branches gleaming in the sun. To the Romans, it is celebration. To those who remember Jerusalem, it is sorrow wrapped in spectacle. At the heart of the procession rode Titus himself. Crowned with a laurel wreath, he stood in his chariot, the people shouting his name. For him, this was not only the reward of victory, but the confirmation of destiny. The Flavian dynasty, his family's rule, cemented by conquest. Imagine the chariot rolling slowly down the Via Sacra, the sacred way. The horses move steadily, their harnesses decorated with gold. Titus raises his hand in acknowledgement, his face calm, his presence commanding. For the Romans, he is hero, conqueror, victor. For those who suffered in Jerusalem, his name is forever tied to their loss. The memory of the triumph was not only carried in celebration, it was carved into stone. In Rome, the Arch of Titus still stands, its reliefs depicting soldiers carrying the spoils of Jerusalem. The menorah, the trumpets, the vessels of the temple, all shown in detail, frozen in marble, a monument to conquest. Imagine standing before the arch in the quiet of evening. The stone glows softly in the fading sun. The carved figures march forever across its surface. To the Romans who built it, it was pride. To the descendants of Jerusalem, it was a reminder carved into the very heart of empire. The fall of Jerusalem became two stories. For Rome, it was victory, celebrated in arches, coins, and processions. For the people of Jerusalem, it was exile, remembered in prayer, story, and mourning. One side inscribed its triumph in stone. The other carried its sorrow in memory. Imagine a Roman citizen pointing proudly to the arch, telling his child of the greatness of Titus. Then imagine a Jewish family in exile, whispering stories of Jerusalem to their children. Their voices low, their hearts heavy. The same event, to memories, forever entwined. Picture Rome at night after the triumph. The streets are quiet, the torches burn low, the people rest after celebration. In the Forum, the Arch of Titus stands, its carvings still fresh, its story still bright. Far away, in lands scattered across the empire, families sit in silence, remembering Jerusalem, holding its memory in their hearts. The triumph was not only about victory, it was about how one empire celebrated while another people endured loss. The story of Jerusalem lived on, both in marble and in memory. The siege of Jerusalem ended in ruin, but its story did not fade. It lingered in memory, in prayer, in stone, and in history. The fall of the city became more than a moment in time. It became a lesson, a sorrow, and a reminder carried across centuries. For the people of Jerusalem and their descendants, the siege became a wound remembered year after year. The temple, once the heart of their faith, was gone. In its place stood silence, exile, and longing. Imagine a family gathered generations later, far from Jerusalem. A candle burns low, a prayer is spoken, a memory of the temple whispered into the night. The city may be gone, but in memory it lives. The rhythm of mourning becomes part of life, carrying Jerusalem forward even in absence. The scattering of survivors reshaped history. Communities grew in distant lands, in Babylon, in Alexandria, in Rome. Jerusalem was no longer only a place of stone. It became a place of longing, carried in stories, rituals, and hope. Imagine a synagogue in a faraway city centuries later. The walls are plain, the lamps burn softly, the prayers rise steadily. At the heart of those prayers is Jerusalem, remembered always, invoked always, carried as a dream that endures. For Rome, the siege was remembered as triumph. But even empires are not eternal. The Arch of Titus still stands, yet the empire that built it has long since fallen. What seemed like eternal power proved, in time, to be fragile. Imagine a traveler walking through Rome centuries after its decline. The arch is still there, its carvings still sharp, but the streets around it are quieter. The empire gone. Stone endures, but power does not. This too is the legacy of Jerusalem's fall, a reminder of the impermanence of conquest. Though the city fell, though the temple burned, though its people scattered, the faith of Jerusalem endured. Prayers continued, stories were told, hope remained alive. The siege destroyed stone, but not spirit. Imagine closing your eyes and hearing voices chanting softly in a distant land, centuries later. Their words are ancient, their rhythm steady. They carry Jerusalem not in walls, but in hearts. The survival of memory is its own triumph, quiet and enduring. For us today, the siege of Jerusalem is not only history, it is a mirror, showing us the cost of division, the weight of empire, the fragility of stone, and the endurance of faith. It reminds us that walls can fall, but memory remains. That conquest can break cities, but not silence voices carried forward in song, story, and prayer. Picture Jerusalem under the stars as it is now. The ruins are quiet, the stones ancient, the city rebuilt in layers of time. Yet in those stones the memory of the siege still lingers, whispering softly to those who walk its streets. The legacy of 70 CE is not only sorrow, it is also endurance, memory, and the quiet strength of survival. We have walked together through the story of Jerusalem in 70 CE. We have seen its streets filled with life, its walls standing tall, its temple glowing with gold. We have felt the slow weight of siege, the hunger, the thirst, the silence. We have watched its walls breached, its temple fall, its people scattered, and we have reflected on how its memory lingers, carried across centuries, never fully lost. Now, as you listen, you are far from those days of hunger and fear. You rest in comfort, in safety, in warmth. No siege surrounds you, no walls confine you. You have the freedom to let go of the weight of history and to settle deeply into peace. The people of Jerusalem endured because they had no choice. You endure in a different way. By allowing your mind to find calm, your body to find stillness, your breath to fall into rhythm. The stones of Jerusalem carry memory, but you need not carry them tonight. Let the weight of the siege drift softly away. Let the sound of Roman hammers, the cries of hunger, the silence of loss fade into the distance. What remains is only calm. The quiet rhythm of history turned into reflection, not burden. As you lie here, imagine the city at night, long after the siege. The stars shine above, the ruins lie quiet, the people rest in silence. Now imagine yourself joining that silence, but not in sorrow, in peace. The past has spoken, the present is yours to rest in. Take a slow breath, feel your body sink deeper into comfort. Let your thoughts drift gently, like dust settling over quiet stones. The siege has ended, the story is told, and you are free to rest. To help you ease further into sleep, calm music will follow. Like the steady rhythm of distant chant, like the hush of wind over ancient walls, it will guide you gently toward rest. Good night, my friend. Rest well, and may peace be with you.